I found this book called Doing the Thing, and it was all about recognizing that within every single person is this untouchable light that's always there. No matter how you look, no matter what you do, no matter what you achieve, there's something infinite, eternal inside of you, this light, this love, this brilliance that every single human has. And I thought, maybe that's true. Maybe just because I don't look the way I think I'm supposed to look doesn't mean that I can't be loved, doesn't mean that I can't be happy, doesn't mean that I can't see value in myself. And then something just started shifting after that.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Before we begin today's episode, I'd like to share some words with you from a Wheel of the Year participant. Stephanie writes, "Honoring the changing of the seasons with Eileen is one of my favorite rituals. The space she creates is sacred and deeply rooted in honoring the earth and the women gathered. She makes space for us to witness all that has transpired, good and bad. She calls out our highest vision and walks us through clearing the space we need to see our biggest dreams come true, one season at a time. Setting aside the time to sit in these circles is truly a gift to yourself. I can't wait for the next one." A gift to yourself. I love that framing because it's genuinely what these ceremonies are intended to be. 8 times a year, I open a circle for women to gather and mark the turning of the wheel. Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lunasa, Samhain, the solstices and the equinoxes. Each ceremony is a chance to pause, to reflect on what the season is asking of you, to release what no longer serves, and to vision forward with intention and support. You don't need any experience. You don't need to know anything about Celtic traditions or the Wheel of the Year itself. You just need to be willing to give yourself the gift of presence and to arrive with curiosity. Upcoming ceremony details are at myluminous-life.ca/wheel-of-the-year-ceremonies, and I truly hope to see you at the next one. Hello, Woo crew, and welcome back to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and I'm here today with a guest that I'm so excited to carry on a conversation with. Whitney Walker is a licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in addiction, eating disorders, trauma, and spirituality. She also works as a recovery coach and spiritual guide. She lives a nomadic lifestyle and has been living on the road, traveling the country for over 4 years. Whitney incorporates spiritual concepts into her work, including the return of the divine feminine to our world and moving from a place of fear to love, releasing self-destruction and rejection to embrace unconditional self-love and acceptance. These ideas form the concept of Women Awaken, her business and vision for the future, and the name of her podcast. Whitney created the Women Awaken podcast, a holistic guide to wellness and abundant self-love, along with an accompanying YouTube channel. I got the very great privilege of being a guest on Whitney's podcast earlier this week. Hopefully you'll have heard that episode, tuned into it when I shared about it back in March. By the time you're listening to this, welcome to the show, Whitney. I'm so delighted to get to carry on our conversation here.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So as you are aware, I start every one of these conversations with a question about spirituality and how it has woven itself into your life, how it informs the work that you do. As you know from our chat earlier this week, I came to spirituality, when I say late in life or recently in my timeline. And so I'm always so curious to hear about other people's spiritual journeys. So I'd love if you would share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that my spiritual journey most prominently began in my early 20s. And for me, it began as a point of desperation. When I was younger, I was bullied very severely from about seventh grade through college for the way I looked. And so I had just like rock bottom self esteem. By the time I reached my 20s, after all that, I was almost non functional. I went to college, but I felt like my self esteem was so rock bottom that I was just consistently putting myself down before others could. I never had a relationship because if anybody actually liked me, I didn't believe it. I thought I was like the ugliest person in the world. I had a horrific eating disorder. I abused drugs and alcohol. It was pretty bleak. But amongst all that, most people knew me as like a very vibrant, funny, energized person because that's who I was at a soul level. But I was marred by these years of just cruelty and just such doubt in myself. And just really what it came down to was I didn't want to be me. I really hit rock bottom in my early 20s. After college, I came back home to the Bay Area, California, and I worked for a few years. And just continue on that path of just feeling horrible. I was drinking too much. I would get involved with, men who just didn't respect me and I didn't think I deserved any better. And I just didn't want to live that way anymore. And so I moved to Seattle. I thought, well, maybe if I move and I like lost some weight and I changed my hair and I was like, maybe if I'm different and I go somewhere different, I'll be a different person. But as they say, wherever you go, there you are. So I changed my life in my early 20s. I moved to a new place and it was still the same old me, the same old pains, the same old tendencies. And so for the first time in my life, I went to go to therapy because I was like, I can't do this anymore. I
Mm.
was deep in bulimia. That was one form of my eating disorder. I was self-destructing. I was drinking too much. I was throwing myself at men who were clearly not interested. And so I went to see a therapist and after a few sessions, she's like, "Well, do you think that there's more to you than your appearance?" Because I was obsessed. I thought that happiness was being attractive. I thought that if you were attractive, people are nice to you and they like you, which there's a reason why you feel that way. It's because that's what our society often tells us, especially women, that just don't
Mhm.
just be a good looking, just be attractive, be pleasing to especially men. You'll be fine and you'll find your way. And I was really stuck in that superficiality. But I knew I wasn't a superficial person. I cared so deeply about others. I was so curious about others. I was very empathic. But here I was, I had no empathy for myself because I wasn't what I thought I was supposed to be. And so at one point this therapist was like, "Why don't you consider that there's more to you than just on the outside? What's on the inside?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I still want to be considered attractive." She's like, "Well, why don't you go check out this bookstore? There's a bookstore called East West Books. It's kind of a spiritual based bookshop." And I was like, "Well, I'm not religious." And she's like, "It's not about that. They have a religious section there, but it's more about different means of spirituality. But it's also, there's a lot of books about like self love and self acceptance." So I
Mhm.
went there, and at the time, I hadn't found a job yet in Seattle. And I just it became like my personal church. I found this book called Doing the Thing, and it was all about recognizing that within every single person is this untouchable light that's always there. No matter how you look, no matter what you do, no matter what you achieve, there's something infinite, eternal inside of you, this light, this love, this brilliance that every single human has. And I thought, maybe that's true. Maybe just because I don't look the way I think I'm supposed to look doesn't mean that I can't be loved, doesn't mean that I can't be happy, doesn't mean that I can't see value in myself. And then something just started shifting after that. And I remember at one point I loved hot yoga and I was doing a hot yoga class and I realized it was just me in a sports bra and shorts. And I was like, what if this is all you need? I could like feel my heart. I could feel that light. And I thought, you could you know, not have any possessions. You could not have to look any certain way. And the greatest thing you have to give is the love in your heart. That's it. That's all you need. And look around the world, like that's, I think the world could really use that more than like hot chicks, which I just, we all get fixated on things, right? Like hotness isn't that,
Mm.
but for me, it was. It felt like I was missing out on the life I thought I was supposed to have. I was missing out on people being nice to me, being interested in me, and love. I thought I was unlovable because I was too ugly to be loved. So with that, it just opened this door, which took a whole nother decade to actually move into and embody that. But to anyone listening, I want to encourage, if you're on your path of spirituality, remember that it is truly a process, right? And think about anything else. Like if you start a program to achieve a certain degree, you don't just start the program and you're like, cool, I'm a doctor. That was easy. It's a whole thing. So when I sought out to begin to learn to love myself from the inside out, it took a while, but every day, every year, I was learning and growing more. And for me, that meant choosing to get sober from drugs and alcohol, choosing to get treatment for my eating disorder, choosing to continue therapy, choosing to impart practices of self love and care. Because I used to always just think so much about what was everybody else thinking about me. And I thought, well, what if you love yourself enough to let those concerns go and tend to yourself more? And so that's what I started doing. And I realized there was this quote from that book I mentioned, Doing the Thing. And it said, trying to love yourself from the outside in is a doomed prospect. And that
Mm.
just reverberated through my soul. It was like I finally heard my soul. It was like, yeah, you can't,
Yeah.
you could change everything about yourself. And if you don't love yourself, it's not going to do a dang thing.
Hmm.
So, and so that's what I really embodied was like, how about we try to love who you are at your essence? And wouldn't you know, as I did that, I became more attractive. I shifted, more people were interested in me genuinely. So that was where my spiritual journey began. And, everything again happens by a process and by degrees. So that was like my initiation and just trying to like, I mean, honestly, trying to save my life because I was at that dire place.
Hmm.
And once I got sober, that really opened up new doors of, well, once you kind of make things right in your inner world, then the fun begins because then you can start to give that away. And what that is literally magic. And that's what I love about the spiritual path is you recognize, again, this whole thing, what you have in here is infinite and you can use it any way you want. You can use it as a tool to heal people, to inspire people, to offer love and comfort to people, to, share gifts and knowledge to others. And again, none of that has to do with anything external. And that's when I realized like I wanted to be a therapist because I wanted to show people that attachments to externals will always keep us imprisoned.
Yeah.
If we decide that we need things outside of ourselves to regulate ourselves, then we become dependent on them. And that's where I had found myself in my 20s. So that next decade again was about freeing myself from these notions, these ideas. And wouldn't you know, that's the other fun thing about your spiritual path is like your soul loves it when you start to connect with it and work with it. And what does that look like? Synchronicities, coincidences, alignment, meeting people, arriving in places, happening to find out about certain books or places or events, all of these things. And that just started escalating really once I got to like 2019. And the other thing that happened in 2019, I'd already done a lot of this work. I was doing really well. I'd been sober for years. I'd become a therapist. I was licensed. I was on my path. And then I felt this calling to go to the UK because my heritage is Scottish, English, and Irish, which I think, did you say that was the same for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I did.
And so I just felt this call to go. And I went to England, Scotland, Ireland, and I came back and it was as if my ancestors had joined me. And for me, the message was women, bring women together. Let women
Mm.
share their voice, their thoughts, their ideas. It's important for women to be able to speak and come together in group. And I was like, okay, like, I don't know where this is coming from. Like, why I'm suddenly obsessed with women and bringing women together, but I guess that's what I'm going to do. So I started doing that. And then the pandemic hit and I started doing online women's group. And that's when I realized, well, what if I started a podcast to talk about these ideas and speak to women? And that's where Women Awaken was born, which is the idea that I think, I mean, of course, everybody has accessible to spirituality. It's our true nature, right?
Yeah.
However, there's a special element that is the feminine, right? There's the masculine and feminine, which are just energies. All sexes
Mhm.
have both, but women have more attunement with this feminine energy, which is about, to me, it's the roots and the foundation of life that everything
Yeah.
grows. And they say that women are water and men are structure, form, and they complement each other because women are so expansive and they can, move into anything. But the masculine allows for creation by saying, let me make a container for this and security and
Mm.
protection for it. So for me, also, the feminine represents what my whole journey was. You have to love yourself first. First and
Yeah.
foremost, you honor yourself because by honoring yourself, you're honoring life. And what I still work towards every day, because, I still struggle at times, but that if I'm not honoring myself, if I'm in a place of judgment, criticism, insecurity, I don't judge myself for it, but it's a lack of reverence for life when I do that because I am life and you are life and everything around you is life. And when we don't have reverence for life, it's as if the soil of the earth is just degraded, right?
Yeah.
And you and I actually
Yeah.
talk soil on earth, and I think how sacred and important that is for the growth of life and healthy and rich nutrient foods. The same for human beings. If the
Mm.
soil that we're growing out of is just marred with this sickness of I'm not good enough, I'm not deserving, then life can't flourish. But when you invest in the soil of your life that you grow from, then you can create something really beautiful that's really genuine, right?
Yeah. 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 I love hearing people's stories because it's always interesting to pick up on the threads that are similar between so many of us.
Mhm.
And the shared experience of, I mean, every single person in who's walking the path of a healer in one form or another, it's almost always that we found ourselves in a time of need. We found a healer, a therapist, a counselor, a energy healer, coach, whatever that person might be. And it changed our lives, and it put this compulsion within us almost to then take up that torch and change the lives of others. And I think something I really want to kind of converse with you about in your story is that, like, that theme of being stuck in a place where we're attached to the external validation, the I have to look a certain way, that I need that external approval. That sense where you said, I wasn't what I thought I was supposed to be, and therefore I was unlovable, or I wasn't living up to some external beauty standard, and therefore I was unlovable. And I think there's something really resonant here that's happening right now with this rise and the return of the divine feminine, and this rise of women's movements, and this kind of taking back our voices and our power, is this recognition that we've been kept disempowered in society by having these beliefs perpetuated upon us, almost, of like, yeah, you do need to look there are certain beauty standards. I've been raging about shaving lately because I recently found out that women shaving their legs and their underarms, etc., began because during the war, I think it was the First World War, Gillette was, or it might have been the second, I can't remember right now, but Gillette was losing money because all the men were off at war, so they weren't buying shaving products. They're like, oh my gosh, look, we could market to the women. Maybe they have they could shave their legs, and they started to make a campaign basically saying that unshaven legs was unladylike. And so we get all of this external pressure that keeps us disempowered and keeps us picking on ourselves, picking on others, tearing them down. I was listening to somebody talking about the word tramp stamp for the low back tattoo that so many of us got in that heyday. And initially it was this form of self-expression, and then it got twisted. And again, it was something to be ashamed of. And so just this, the tool that is women's bodies in the patriarchy and capitalism is something that's really present on my mind, and just feels so present in your story and what you overcame and what you realized as you went on your journey of discovering that it's actually what's within that matters.
Yeah, and I think that so much of it, I mean, all of it comes down to fear, right? And fear is born of beliefs. All of our fears don't exist on their own. They come from a deep held belief. So
Mhm.
over time, however many hundreds of years now, women have been told that we have like a very narrow window we can fit in to be desirable, and desirable equated to alive, basically, because if we didn't have a secure place in the world, then we couldn't survive, right? I mean, unless we wanted to live in destitution, right? Women who did not have a partner and didn't have, weren't seen as desirable, they were the ones that were left to, with their kids on the street and like just trying to make ends meet. Whereas like people who were more attractive, women who were more attractive, then they could be scooped up by a masculine and given shelter and opportunities. It was very, very hard for women
Mhm.
to find their way on their own. It always has been because they've been seen as less than in, the society we've created, again, for a very long time. And what's interesting
Mhm.
is I've actually read a lot of books, and there's a lot of theories that before our whole, current day, it used to be matriarchal societies, that those existed, and that they actually flourished because it wasn't this sense of women are superior and men are inferior. It was just that women are actually really good at consciously making choices together as a group and allowing others to be heard, because men inherently do have a bit of a sense of ego because they're the structure. They need to have an idea of what is and what isn't, right? Where with women, everything, like I said, it's like the water analogy, everything flows together. And so women are able to consider other people's opinions, but also to consider the greatest good, right? Not just isolated conversations about how can we prosper. In these matriarchal societies, it was more of what we would see as like a roundtable discussion of how can we start this community at a base level, make the foundation a place where nothing is created that can't be honored, right? Whereas now, the world that we live in, we are haphazard in everything we do. Look, this endeavor can make a lot of money, so let's do it. Well, you're going to kill trees and you're going to pollute the water. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. That's the message that we get. Just run ahead with it. We can sell a bunch of razors by telling women they need to shave their legs. Just yeah, but women don't. Just do it. It's money.
Yeah.
Everything down to money.
Yeah, which is I want to just make sure that we point out here that that's not the masculine. That's the wounded masculine. That's toxic patriarchal capitalism masculine. That exploitation without consideration for the future. I think that there's a balanced divine masculine energy that is protection and structure and logic and reason fall into that camp. And it's not in essence exploitative, extractive, in like ignoring consequences. But there's that kind of tempering balance. And what we've seen over the last several centuries is this skew towards disregarding the feminine entirely, and that kind of tempering that feminine energy brings. And again, not biologically sexed, though yes, I believe that people born into female bodies, whether it's socialization or it's that we're more in touch with that divine feminine energy, there is that communal aspect, and the taking care of the most vulnerable feels baked into our DNA. And that's likely because we are the ones who bear children, and that's baked into our DNA. But it's a sense of we've come so far from balance. I don't know if you've read Sharon Blackie at all, but she wrote the book If Women Rose Rooted. If you haven't read it, you must. Especially coming from that Celtic background. And she talks about the wasteland and how the time that we're living in is this wasteland because the balance that used to exist between that masculine energy and the feminine energy and the respect of each for the other has been lost. And yeah, that's exactly where we end up with just that push through, do it. Who cares about the long-term consequences? Let's cut down this forest. Oh well, oh now there's flooding. Woe is me. It's like why is nobody thinking ahead? And it's become increasingly apparent that we need something different. And I believe, like you said, I think matriarchal structure is something that could be a solution. And again, in that sense that it's not hierarchical and it's centering the most vulnerable among us, whether they be human or the more than human world as well.
Yeah, and to what you were saying, I would say that the masculine we see today, I would call it unconscious masculine because it's still operating in the masculine form of it's doing exactly what, it's still creating structures, but that's unconscious masculinity, believing that all we need is constant development and constant innovation without roots, right? I use the
Yeah.
analogy that the feminine are like the roots and the masculine is the tree, and both need to be healthy and vibrant to grow. And you need the roots to be strong and deep. And right now, they
Mm-hmm.
don't want feminine to do much. So that's why society is toppling over because it's all
Mm-hmm.
unconscious masculine that's just like, this machine run wild that's never stopping, never stopping. I mean, look at all of our
Mm-hmm.
corporations. They literally have this mentality that says, there's no limit. What's our profit this month? How do we raise profit? There's no limit.
Mm-hmm.
That is unconscious masculine. It's fine with everything toppling over because it's so rampant with greed. Whereas when there's conscious masculinity co- combined with conscious feminine, because there can be unconscious feminine too,
Of
right?
course. Yeah.
It's like somebody like me who's got so caught up in like, well, I'll do anything to look the right way. And
Mm-hmm.
that's and but here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with being beautiful. Women are Venuvian, that energy of the goddess, right? We're allowed to want to feel in our essence and whatever makes us feel sexy. But when we're doing it for the sake of feeling like that's what we need to be enough, that's unconscious. If we were in our conscious mind, we'd know there's no truth in that. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
a certain way to be of value. That's unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're both a little bit unconscious, but I think women more so right now are having this remembrance of what it can look like when we step into our consciousness, and the masculine, a lot of it not so much. But there are definitely many conscious masculine out there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's this sense that I'm feeling, anyways, and I think you likely are feeling as well, and many of the listeners that I don't know if it's sudden, maybe it's just been building, but it feels like all of a sudden everybody is just extra aware of where we've come to, what we've built,
Yeah.
of the toppling. And what we're seeing as this structure topples is like these lash outs, right? Like it's this lashing out, the death throes of something that has been unsustainable, of that, as you said, that constant no limit upwards, that fallacy of linear time and linear progress that is coming to crashing down. And what's happening in response is this really beautiful remembering, I think, for so many people of, oh, yeah, we knew something before that we lost. We knew how to live in harmony with each other. We knew how to live in harmony with the earth. We knew how to live in harmony with ourselves. We knew and remembered at a very cellular level that we are entangled and interconnected with every other being on this earth. And so while it's a really painful and destabilizing time to be living through, it's also really exciting. It feels like there's so much possibility for a different future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, and I spoke of this when you were a guest on my show. One of my favorite terms that really came to me around that same awakening in 2019 about the feminine is the term sovereignty. Because
Mhm.
the biggest thing that any human being can do right now is, again, looking within and recognizing you are just as powerful as anyone else on this planet that we give way too much credence to, right? We say, well, there's the celebrities and there's the politicians, there's the CEOs. They're the ones no, they're not more powerful. What they actually are is they're more exploitive. They know how to do things to get to the top. What's most powerful in the future is going to be being so aligned with truth and love that you only do things that honor yourself and others. Because again, that anything that's based on lies, deception, deceit, greed, it's all gonna it topples eventually because it has no substance to it. The only thing that's real is love. And greed and all of that is still, it's not there's no, I don't think that there's anything that has the absence of love. It's just a very skewed sense of, I need to do this because my needs are most important, right? But that's
Yeah.
when that's
Which
selfish,
again is based in fear.
based in
It's
fear,
like, right? Comes right back to it.
scarcity. So
Yeah.
back to sovereignty, every human being right now, you are free to look at the world and say, it didn't have to be this way. It could be this way. Because again, I think a lot of us were like, well, this is the way it is. You live in towns and there's big cities and there's always going to be corporations. You're allowed to say, no, we never had to do this. We got greedy and we got impatient. And we think we don't need all of this. We could have lived so much more simple, and we can again. So the more people that think outside the box and think, if I could create a world of my imagination, what would it look like?
Mm.
How would we work? Would it be more communal based? There'd be more communities? Would it be living in more like small villages where they're self-led? There's no big government. There's no big corporations because we decide we don't want to be consumers who are destroying the world, destroying the earth with our, how much we need to extract. I'm big on this because that's what I'm realizing now is myself, just as much as anybody else, as any prominent figure in this world, can have a vision of how the world can be. Because you have to remember,
Mhm.
we think, again, we look around and we think, well, this is just the way the world is. False. This world is the way it is because we created it this way, and we can recreate the world. The world is,
Mm.
it's all a dream. It's all, you know, it's all thoughts come into form. When our thoughts and our imagination changes, we create a new world that can be a world where people actually flourish and have greater experiences of joy than they do of depression, fear, love, and
Mm.
fear. Right now, we're in a stage of fear. We
Mhm.
absolutely can experience a life more full of love. And the thing that is the wildest to me is that people kind of think as love and joy and like peace as like pie in the sky hippies idea. They're like, that's not, realistic. But the crazy thing is the way we live now is what's not realistic. If
Mm.
told a society thousands of years ago, there's going to be a society that's full of illness and depression, and they're going to create solutions for the problems that they make for themselves that were never necessary, people would be like, that will never happen. That makes no sense. The way we live now does not make sense. And I think that's so important for people to sit with and consider because it makes you realize, of course, this isn't going to last forever. This is the most difficult way we could possibly have constructed a reality. So it's actually going to be so much easier and so much more natural to move into a place of love and trust and let things kind of come into place in terms of how we work together to create a beautiful life, a good life.
Mm.
We can all live well together without having to have some that have so much and others that have nothing. That also is something we created. It's not a natural
Mm.
result of a society.
Yeah. Yeah, like it is. It's very much, and it's hard when it's all that you've known,
Mhm.
right? We don't have models currently. We have historical models. We have smaller, like some indigenous communities that have been less disrupted by colonialism over the years that we can look at to see how a different way of life might possibly be, but we're so far removed from it that it takes some really courageous imagining, I think, as well, to picture what that could look like to consciously disengage from the practices and the current system. And it's hard because we are in the system, we are living in it, and we do still have to function within it. We do still have to, buy food and eat. And to do that, we need to make money. And that's where it gets so tricky. But it is that piece of getting to choose, even just in micro moments each day, how we might prefer to live and what can we do at the community level, neighbors, right? The friends and family who are near to you. How do we let the ripple of change happen at kind of like that grassroots level? Because the powers that be, the structures, they're toppling themselves.
Yeah.
I don't think we really need to. worry too much aside from like getting out of the way as they thrash to the ground. But how do we create that stability, the root structure that you spoke of at the ground level, beneath the ground level, in preparation for the ability to build again in a different way?
Yeah. And I think it's going to take faith and also, brave souls, people who have already kind
Mm.
of foreseen this. Because the problem is that I do believe, yes, these systems will topple, but as they topple, everything we've gotten used to is going to not be accessible anymore, right? Having
Mm.
stores and close when there's no one to work there. I think we might very well reach that crisis level where the things we usually have access to, we don't. And everything is just,
Mm.
sort of totally dysregulated. But that gives us the opportunity to gather together and say, how can we combine our resources and work together? And I just see it, I almost picturing, the movie How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the book,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I love it.
took all their gifts, but what did they do? They just gathered and said, let's just be together. Let's forget about this stuff. Let's just gather. And I see that, like in my mind's eye, I see that in the future for humans where we're like, we didn't need all that shit anyways. And we'll figure it out.
Mhm.
We'll figure out how to feed ourselves. We'll figure out how to get here. Let's just come together right now. But it might take total, destruction of what is for that moment to come. Because right now, we're still so tied into it. So it actually will be,
Mhm.
we reach the point where the plug is just pulled to a large degree on, everything that we've known. But I do think there might be a little bit of chaos, but I think a lot of us will be like, okay, well, now what can we do?
Mhm.
And for those listening, like that's also the gift. Those who have had a spiritual awakening, that's most likely where your head will be in those situations if you follow that path where I already know that inside my inner world is fine and the outer world is just a fun experience. It's all, an illusion. What's real is inside. So I can come together with others. We can regulate, we can ground, we can offer trust and faith and hope, and we can create something new. And we get to decide what
Mhm.
that new thing is. It's going to need to be something with a lot of trust and transparency because I think that was the very beginning of everything we see today. We stopped being honest, and lies are such a nefarious energy in terms of they constrict the light, right? They constrict
Yeah.
light. Lies are the very first thing. The lack of truth is the sickness and everything. Even like
Yeah.
within your body, they'll say, you know, if you're having issues with like your hip, it's also often because you're trying to suppress or block, not be honest or truthful about something that happened to you, right? Well, this
Mhm.
happened, but I try to suppress it. When we allow things to be expressed, that's when we're our healthiest. And our
Mhm.
society now, there's like this much truth. We're lied
Yeah.
to today about 1,000 things. That's not good for us.
No, and I think that's part of a big piece of the disconnection that we feel too. There's this push towards dehumanizing each other. And again, that's happening from, top down in a lot of ways, but then it gets perpetuated in community. And to be able to create connection and community and collaboration with one another, we have to be open and honest with each other because lies immediately destabilize any connection of trust. And we need trust and we need to see the humanity in each other in order for this to happen. And I think that's why, conversations like this and, on your podcast, I'm guessing our conversation was the way that those conversations go in that space. I think they're so important because it allows us to recognize ourselves in others, even if those others are different from us. We live in different countries. Aside from that, we're not terribly different, but I've had people on from across the world, different backgrounds, and just the ability to see that our stories are echoed even when we have completely different upbringings, different cultures, different language, different skin colors, all of that. I think it's such an important part right now. Would you share a little bit more about your podcast explicitly and what you love most about doing it or what is lighting you up these days about it, or yeah, just whatever you want to share about the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I've been doing my podcast for 5 years now. I started recording episodes in February of 2021, 5 years. And just a fun
Mm.
little snippet, the way my podcast started, this is also kind of how once you step onto your spiritual path, you'll just be presented with opportunities. So I went into 2021 thinking, okay, this year I'm going to have my private practice and therapy. I'm going to write a book. That's going to be my focus. And it was kind of in the back of my mind to do a podcast. And then there's a spiritual networking group called the Feminine Frequency. It's beautiful. Jessica Hadari, she's been a guest on my show. She's the creator of it. And she held this event, and there's 300 women on Zoom. And she picked 3 people at random to speak to the whole group about what they were working, because it was a lot of, people starting businesses and coaches and healers and had offerings. And she picked 2 people, and then she was about to pick the last person. And I was like, she's going to pick your name. And you have nothing to say. And I don't know. I was like, probably not. And sure enough, she called my name, and I'm there able to talk to 300 women. And I had nothing to share. I didn't have an offering. So I just blurted out. I was like, my name's Whitney, and I have the Women Waken podcast, and I need guests. So if you want to be a guest on my show, reach out. I was flooded with messages. So I was like, shit, I guess I'm starting a podcast. So I felt like the divine shone that light on me, and I took the guidance and I just ran with it. And I started with interviewing amazing women who are thought leaders and have beautiful creations and are healers, and just having these conversations around what is possible, right? Where do we come from? Where are we now? And where can we go, basically?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of men in the works too. I've had plenty of men on the show who are aligned with these ideas and concepts. And then it evolved into, I started doing solo episodes where I would take specific topics that I wanted to elaborate on further and share more of my personal experience. Because my biggest thing, the reason why I became a therapist is because I wanted to help people who are still where I used to be, who are in
Yeah.
the dark night of the soul, where they might hate themselves. They might not have no idea how they could ever learn to love themselves, how they have these really strong beliefs based in fear about the truth
Mm-hmm.
that may or may not be accurate, in terms of accuracy, meaning like ultimate truth, which ultimate truth is that we're all 100% lovable and
Mm-hmm.
infinitely capable just inherently. Right? We
Mm-hmm.
have light of the universe inside of us. The universe is infinitely abundant. There's nothing the universe can't do. And we have that inside of us. It's crazy then that we decide, just because we don't look a certain way or haven't achieved something, that we're not good enough. So I wanted to help people with that. And that's sort of what my podcast embodies. But I worked with a podcasting coach once, and he said, when you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. And so that's why I brought it into Women Waken, is I felt that emphasis to speak predominantly to women, to
Yeah.
open up women, and like, really open up, speak your truth,
Yeah.
women. Because when women start speaking their truth, that's when our society will change. When more women feel safe stepping forward and saying, I have an idea and I would like it to be heard and I'd like to implement it. And it's nothing that we
Yeah.
do now, but I don't care because I believe in my vision. So I think it's so important for women to come together, to commune together in communities and groups and speak, so that we can start and pave the way for new trails to be blazed that only I think the feminine can really create now, because we've had it all be masculine. And now we need to add some of the feminine, and then can merge
Mm.
with, like you said, the conscious masculine, the healthy masculine with the healthy feminine. It'll be a whole new world. And I think it's a beautiful
Yeah.
world. And that's all
Yeah.
I do with my life, is talk about that.
Yeah, which is perfect. So, for anybody who's wanting to listen in and hear these conversations that you're having, your solo episodes, this carry on, this kind of listening and learning from you, your podcast can be found everywhere podcasts can be found.
Spot- Spotify, Apple Podcast. I'm on YouTube. I don't put all my stuff on YouTube, but a lot of it is there. Yeah, it's everywhere.
Perfect. Yeah. And of course, the show notes will have all of the links to go and listen directly if you're not already listening after having heard our episode on Whitney's podcast. By the time this one airs, that will have been out. And yeah, are there any last words, bit of wisdom, anything that you want to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
Just to encourage anybody listening to remember that all the greatest wisdom you can ever find is within you. You are your own
Mhm.
greatest source of wisdom. And if
Mhm.
you're listening to this and thinking, well, that sounds great, but I don't think I have that, you do. You do. And you actually have something that I don't have and that Eileen doesn't have. You have your own magic that I think every single human being that comes into existence has one unique expression. It's so take a moment, take that moment to, whatever it's in meditation, whether it's walking through the forest, going for a hike, just putting your hand on your heart or whatever you feel called to, and realizing, what message does my heart have for me? What message does my soul have for me? Because it's in there, I promise you. That's what's so great is when more humans realize they have a gift, life becomes fun. We can go through life
Yeah.
and share ourselves, not out of, puffing our chest up, but just out of like, oh, you have a gift and I have a gift, and let's join together. We all have our gift. So I encourage you to look within, because that's where yours is. It's not outside of yourself.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. It was such a treat to be able to carry on the conversation we started earlier this week. And again, for listeners, the show notes will include the links to go and listen to the Women Waken podcast with Whitney and continue to engage in these really, really important topics for our time. As always, thank you for listening, Woo Crew. If you enjoy this episode, like, subscribe, comment, rate, whatever the appropriate action is on the platform that you are listening or watching on. And I will be back here again, same time next week with another solo episode for you. Bye for now.